Warm welcome, Vanakkam, Swagatham to everyone. What I propose to do in this video is to offer some belated reflections about the United Nations General Assembly now in session in New York. The most significant part of the proceedings are all over, therefore, we can treat it as concluded. Surely by the time you get to see this video, curtains should have come down on this very important global coming together of leaders. I wouldn't be exaggerating the matter if I were to say that the present session of the United Nations General Assembly has become a stage of India's global embarrassment. The one presence that was conspicuously absent was that of the icon of India, our Prime Minister, Narendra Modi. I sat and listened in rapt attention to the 56 minutes long speech by the American President Donald J. Trump. Of course, I do not agree with, and I did not agree with much of what he said, and I do not agree with much of what he's doing. But there is something about which I cannot but have a positive response, and that is Donald Trump can afford to be fully what he wants to be. He is not consistent at all, as all of us know, but he is consistently inconsistent. And he speaks with a degree of inner assurance and freedom, which is rarely seen on the international stage from other world leaders, particularly our Prime Minister. Now, you would have seen a number of videos speculating on why our Prime Minister chose to be absent from this very important assembly of world leaders, where he, as representing the world's largest functioning democracy, would have and should have occupied a place of respect and preeminence. Instead, there was a disconcerting vacuum. It is not my intention here to offer speculative interpretations about how and why this happened. The fact is, it has happened. And all I wish to say here is that this is the outcome, the final result of a complete collapse in our foreign policy, which has been in the offing for a while, particularly since the day Article 370 was abolished and the status of Jammu and Kashmir as a state was literally marauded, from which that region has not recovered yet. Unfortunately, in this country, we don't have the freedom to analyze in truth the true nature and long-term significance of whatever is being done by the government. Somehow it has come to be assumed as a patriotic duty that every citizen becomes a courtier, member of a cheering squad, completely abdicating the duty to speak the truth, even though the national motto is "the truth shall triumph and the truth alone will triumph." Now, what has happened to us since the day that I mentioned is that we have projected an extremely negative image of ourselves. I'm not saying that this is the only contributing factor. There are various other factors in international affairs, even in national affairs. No single outcome can be attributed to a single cause. In disease also, there is something called multifactorial etiology. It sounds a little tongue-twisting expression. It simply means that for a particular phenomenon to come into being, many factors have to contribute. So, as far as India's foreign policy is concerned, as Rahul Gandhi, I remember, alerted the Indian government in very emphatic terms that we are headed to disaster. We are alienating everyone without any ostensible gain to India. This is a bus ride to nowhere, but his warning went unheeded precisely because of the unjustifiably negative image the BJP manufactured about Rahul Gandhi, in which they came to believe, and therefore they crippled themselves in relation to the advice that he gave, which should have been taken seriously. And today, of course, the consequences are there for everyone to see. Now, for example, if you look at Sindoor, Operation Sindoor, as is by now quite well known, India got completely isolated. There was nobody to stand with us. There were many countries standing with Pakistan, even though, as all of us believe, that Pakistan is the initial agent provocateur, the provocating agent for this entire drama of violence. There were many countries standing with Pakistan, but we were completely isolated in spite of the fact that we drummed up the familiar anti-terrorism rhetoric, and there were no bias for our rhetoric. Ironically, the only country that showed some sympathy towards us was Afghanistan, led by the Taliban. China aided and abetted Pakistan 100%. Turkey expressed its solidarity with Pakistan. Several other countries also did. Now think of the pact recently signed between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, a country that we have been trying to woo so arduously in recent times. Think of the rousing reception that General Munir got in Washington, invitation to have lunch with the President of India, a distinction that the Indian Prime Minister is thirsting for, but is being denied. In fact, as has been now stated repeatedly by others, one of the reasons why Narendra Modi decided not to go to the United Nations General Assembly was that his request for a date with Trump was turned down. So he felt snubbed. And also he apprehended that he would have been isolated by the rest of the leaders of the world. Now, one likely fallout of this is that Jaishankar, the present foreign minister, a minister for foreign affairs of India, could lose his job. I tell you why. You go back to the early 90s. There was the Middle Eastern operation. America decided to attack Saddam Hussein's Iraq, which was not merely a campaign launched against one person or one nation. It was part of a much wider policy. At that time, the president was George Bush, and the Secretary of State was Jim Baker. So Jim Baker worked very hard to create a Middle East peace plan. But at that time, the Middle East peace plan devised by Jim Baker did not stand in a good prospect of succeeding. So the journalist asked President George Bush as to how he thought about it and whether or not he would be embarrassed if this peace plan came to naught. You know what George Bush said? And that's very interesting. He said, if the plan succeeds, it will be known as the Bush peace plan. If it fails, it will be known as the Baker peace plan. In other words, it's a standard practice in international affairs that the leader of a country takes a credit for whatever succeeds, even if he is not the architect of it. On the other hand, if something goes wrong and the plan fails, somebody else will be made the scapegoat. Now, everybody knows that India's foreign policy is not scripted by just one man called the Minister for External Affairs, in this case S. Jaishankar. It has to be the collective achievement of a cabinet. But since the outcome of our foreign policy, especially in the last 5 years, has been alarmingly disastrous to us, the position of the foreign minister, in my opinion, has become untenable. And in fact, the position of the government itself has become untenable, because if India is isolated on the stage of international affairs, then the consequences of that will affect every Indian, and not merely one person called the foreign minister or even the cabinet. India as a whole suffers, and we have suffered a serious setback. It's been, our foreign policy has been an absolute disaster. But no prime minister, no leader, especially a leader who is so mindful of his public image as Narendra Modi is, will take responsibility for it. So a scapegoat will have to be found. And in this case, the only credible scapegoat is Jaishankar, our Minister for External Affairs. And therefore, my reckoning is, and this is purely speculative, my reckoning is that he'll be axed. And he'll be axed very soon. And who is likely to take his place? He could well be succeeded by Harsh Vardhan Shringla. Remember this name. Harsh Vardhan Shringla. 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 By the way, both Jaishankar and Harsh Vardhan Shringla have been associated with St. Stephen's College. They're Stephanians. Jaishankar taught in St. Stephen's for a while. Harsh Vardhan Shringla has been one of our students. But this is quite immaterial. There's no credit on that count alone. Harsh Vardhan Shringla joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1984, if I remember. 1989, I think. 1989. And he did pretty well. He was India's ambassador to the United States of America, India's ambassador to Bangladesh, and I think he was also our ambassador to Taiwan. But the third, I'm not particularly sure. I think he was. But more significantly, he was the Foreign Secretary of India, Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for 2 years, from 2020 to 2022. And you would remember that it was Harsh Vardhan Shringla who organized that massive show of Modi's popularity in Texas, where Modi made that now somewhat, or rather extremely regrettable statement, "Agli baar Trump Sarkar." But that show that Shringla organized made a massive impact on Narendra Modi, and he rewarded him by making him India's Foreign Secretary, which is a very powerful post. And after that, after he finished his term in 2022, India became the president of G20. And you remember, the G20 session in 2023 was held in India. And who was the chief organizer? The main animating force behind G20? It was again Harsh Vardhan Shringla. So he has proved his credibility, has proved his loyalty to the master, and he has also proved his ability. He's a very capable foreign affairs officer, foreign service officer. So I wouldn't be surprised if Harsh Vardhan Shringla succeeds S. Jaishankar as the next External Affairs Minister of India. But that is not the main point I want to make. The main point I want to make, and I crave your attention, particular attention from now onwards. What is a lesson that we have to learn from our present extremely lamentable situation? The lesson is important and it must be learned. See, the problem with us is that we think that whatever we think and feel about our country, the rest of the world is also obliged to think and feel. We in this country remain highly manipulated by very powerful propaganda. We also have a culture which is by nature very obsequious to masters, and a psychology of subjectivity which discounts objective truths and goes by subjective feelings. And because of our social cultural underdevelopment, we also have a psychological need to hero worship. So if the leader, even if the leader happens to be a very ordinary person, we will exalt him and turn him into a god. Whether or not the person concerned merits such exaltation, the fact of the matter is that we need a demigod. Why? Because we cannot look after ourselves. We believe that all our problems will be solved by this demigod that we create. After all, human beings have been in the business of making and unmaking gods for a very long time. There are secular gods, there are religious gods. And both suffer the same predicament. And both serve the same purpose. So we have now created a new god called Narendra Modi. We shouldn't take the full name, Namo, Namo, Namo. And we think that whatever he is doing is right. And it is impious, it is heretical to dissent, disagree or question what he is doing. But please understand that the rest of the world is not obliged by any of these standards. They will take a very objective view, number one. Number two, they will also go by what is in their best interest. After all, we are doing everything in terms of what is in our best interest. If we bought oil from Russia, it was not to promote world peace, though we would like to pretend that we are promoters of world peace. Oil from Russia was bought not even to benefit the consumers in India. You and I know who benefited from all this. If petrol and diesel continue to be sold at the same rate as they were sold before we started getting this discounted oil from Russia, huge discounts, the question remains who benefited from this. That's again another point, a different issue. So the problem here is that India thinks, or we have come to think, that we can do whatever we want. We can turn this way, that way, as our convenience dictates. But the world is obliged to maintain the same attitude towards us. Now, the fact in the global order is, whether you like it or not, I don't like it, but I have to accept it. Even today, America calls the shots. This situation could change soon. 5 years, 10 years down the road, it could be very different. But as of now, America calls the shots. Now, if you remember how S. Jaishankar postured in the last 2 years, particularly in relation to America and Europe, speaking the truths to their face, what he said was right. What he said was factually correct, but it was not politically correct. Now, you ask me whether the Foreign Minister of India shouldn't say what is factually correct. I would say yes, he should do that, provided you have the domestic strength to back it up. That's important. Trump can say what he wants because his domestic scenario, domestic situation is so strong. We cannot afford that luxury because we are weak internally and we continue to weaken ourselves. In this country, many things have been done in the last 10 years, and no man with senses can say that they have been done with the singular view of making India stronger and richer. Take demonetization. I published 18 articles on demonetization, and the consequence was that I got blacklisted by all newspapers. No newspaper has published an article of mine since then. So the suppression of free thinking has not worked to our advantage. It imprisons us in a fool's paradise. The abrogation of 370. It might seem that it is a very bold and innovative step, but globally there has been a backlash. In fact, the country that has gained maximally from this is Pakistan. And it's interesting that today, on the global stage, Pakistan commands far greater weight than India does. A worse condemnation than this I can't imagine. If you are objective, you are aware of what's happening, you will know that today Pakistan matters much more than India does. Though we have made a virtue of ridiculing Pakistan and dismissing it as a non-entity, as a failed state, a rogue state, etc., which it is. But because of their shrewdness, because of their shrewd foreign policy, China and America, both bitter enemies, both are wooing Pakistan. We do not know whether this will endure for the next 10 years or 5 years. We do not know. As of now, I'm talking about the reality as it is obtained on the global scene today, whereas India has become a pariah. So, the important message that I read from this very regrettable scenario is that we need to have a total radical relook at what we have made ourselves to be. If you create a society, a nation of internal dissension, where certain sections of the population are suppressed, large segments of the people are kept backward, with all doors of their progress shut hard against them, and various communities excluded from the fruits of national development, and more than anything else, the country being crippled with the psychology of negativity, politics of hatred, of violence, and the lack of opportunities for the really significant section of our society, namely the youth, to contribute their might to nation building by working. Unemployment of the youth. And nobody seems to be interested in solving that problem. There is far greater importance attached to solving or getting Kashmir under our hand than solving the unemployment problem of the youth. Whereas, in my opinion, the second should be the first priority. And I'm totally convinced that our topmost priority must be to forge a psychology of national unity, dynamism, and vitality, so that our energies are not dissipated in fruitless, internecine quarrels and disputes. Alienation is eradicated. Every Indian feels positive and excited about our country and feels inwardly motivated to do his very best to make India the best country in the world, the go-to place in the world. You know, about 2 months ago, Trump made an insulting statement about India. You know what he said about India? India is a dead economy. He said India is a dead economy. Now, it's not a casual statement, it's an assessment. Now, we can unleash a blitzkrieg of propaganda and say that India is the fastest growing economy in the world, India is the rising tiger, India is, well poised to become the third largest economy in the world. But when the world looks at India, perhaps not many countries would disagree with what Trump has said. I'm not saying that nothing great is happening in this country. I'm saying that we are not utilizing our full potential in this most important task of nation building, which is the primary task to enable the Prime Minister of India or the President of India to go to the world stage and take a stand which is credible and which will command respect. If your house is not in order and you want to be accepted as a world guru by people outside your country, you are living in a fool's paradise. In one of my earlier videos, I said, drawing the insight from Immanuel Kant's work, Ideas for a Universal History to a Cosmopolitan End, where he emphasizes, and I fully agree with him, that the respect, the authority that a country commands outside its borders will be directly proportionate to the internal cohesion of that country, the law and order of that country, and the economic, cultural dynamism of that country. We are not paying any attention to any of these things. We think that by waving Modi's magic wand, some kind of grand, glorious illusion can be created, and the whole of India, 140 crore Indians, can be bought into the grand illusion and national euphoria. You can't go to a world stage with this kind of delusional euphoria. You will be held to account for what you say and what you do. There'll be no mercy. There'll be no soft pedaling. You will be told to your face who you are. You'll be put in your place. So, in my opinion, merely changing the foreign minister for external affairs, will not do. Substituting him with somebody presumably better will not do, unless and until we are willing to change within ourselves, within the country. Until we firmly, sincerely, and in truth commit ourselves to building a healthy, dynamic, prosperous India, characterized by the 4 fundamental values stated in the preamble to the Indian Constitution, namely justice, liberty, equality, fraternity, and we are a far cry from all 4 of them, we cannot command respect among the nations of the world. There is no escape from this task. Unfortunately, for example, how can the Prime Minister of India go and assume airs of propagating peace and advocating a righteous world order when the whole world knows that massive electoral frauds have happened in India? Whether or not that allegation is true, this is in the knowledge of the global community. And Modi is clever enough to know that people will turn their nose up against him. Because after all, there is a very strong suspicion, solely a suspicion, that he too could have benefited from this fraudulent manipulation of the franchise, which is extremely embarrassing. How can the Prime Minister of India go and advocate peace on a global stage when the whole world knows that he has been buying oil from Russia and funding the Russia-Ukraine war indirectly? In fact, a year ago, when Modi visited Zelensky and offered his mediation to establish peace, Zelensky told him to his face, you first stop buying oil from Russia, then come and talk peace. You can't do both. And I agree with Zelensky. You can't be funding a war so that it goes on and then talk about establishing peace. It's a height of hypocrisy. Nobody will buy that from you. People from within the country, people from your camp might applaud you for your cleverness. But outside the country, it will be seen as rank hypocrisy. We have to change all this, and no question about it. Now, I was thinking of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. It has become a national virtue, a national pastime to ridicule him. If there is one person who is responsible for all the evils that India suffers from, it is that one man called Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, according to Sri Narendra Modi and his worshippers, Andhavats. If Jawaharlal Nehru were the Prime Minister of India today, India's would have been a very respected voice. People would have heeded with respect, perhaps with greater respect than the voice of Donald Trump. I dare say that would have been the case. Well, even Mrs. Indira Gandhi would have commanded respect. So let's get real, let's be truthful, let's be factual. Let's get real for a change. All this drama, all this, nukkad, all this play acting, all this hypnotic manipulation of people's sentiments, all this can go on within the country. Though even within the country it's harming us, it will continue to harm us, but you can't go outside the country with this cheap drama and expect to be listened to, expect to be respected, expect to be accepted even. So let's take note of this. Our foreign policy has been an absolute disaster. But what many people are not telling you is this: the root of the collapse of our foreign policy lies not outside the country, but within the country. And if a solution is to be found, if the situation is to be redeemed and improved, we have to begin the work at home. At home. There's no other alternative. The sunk ideology is a disaster because it's an ideology of negativity. And I say this out of respect for the members of the Sangh. You cannot build a great nation with a mindset of negativity, prejudice, violence, dishonesty. A great nation can be built only with great minds. And if you think that great minds are urban Naxals, God help you. That's all I can say. Jai Hind. Namaste. May God bless India.